Hey guys, Marco here. So today I wanted to do a video on what's been happening lately with healthcare and especially this whole, I guess what they're calling it is exit interview with Dr. Gardner. So it's, I will say off the top of, right off the bat here that it's fascinating what happened, what we all got to witness. It's one of those few rare times that kind of like the veil's pulled back and you can see what is potentially happening within like the guts of the machinery and what some of the opinions are of these bureaucrats about what's going on. So there's so many things to go over, but this video I just wanted to keep it like very short and talk about what potentially is the biggest takeaway at least, or something that everybody could focus on that could really help Prince Edward Island in figuring out this healthcare crisis, which I will just say just very quickly that I think, there's this debate. Dennis King, I guess, just recently gave an interview and said healthcare in PI is strained. I will say that healthcare in PI has collapsed, okay? It has the longest wait times to see a specialist out of any province in Canada. I mean, I think the Fraser Institute said that now it's over 50 weeks, and some people I seen on social media are reporting. It's hard to believe. One person said that their mother 2 year wait time to see a certain specialist. Some people I've seen more than one instance of people reporting a year and a half, and I will say that when you are telling an elderly person that they have to wait in pain to see a specialist for a year and a half, that is inhuman, that is cruel, especially when you tell them that they have a right to healthcare. You can't tell people that they have a right to healthcare and then put them on a wait list for over a year. That if you put them on a wait list for over a year, you're basically denying their right. I'm not saying they have a right to healthcare. You're saying it, and at the same time, you're taking away their right by putting in on this abnormal wait list. So it's collapsed. You are collapsed. I mean, these wait lists, no big shock, but when you put them people on there, a lot of these people, some of them end up dying on these wait lists because you don't get to their healthcare soon enough. And I mean, if we're being really honest in Canada, what's also starting to happen is that these people are so depressed about being on these wait lists, they're so much in pain that you now see the government pushing this MAID program where it's like, well, have you thought about like just ending it right here, right now? We'll just kill you off. And like that program, MAID program, it's growing every year. More and more people are taking that option. So when you're starting to kill your sick people instead of taking care of them, that is a collapse of healthcare. I'm sorry. We shouldn't dance around this issue and say, oh, it's strained, or Dr. Garden was more like, oh, we're nearing a very bad point. No, you've crossed that point a long time ago. When you start injecting people with lethal substances in order to lower these wait lists and bring down the costs, you've crossed a particular line that there's no coming back from. So anyway, let's get going with the clip. The way this was set up was Brad Trivers asked a question and Dr. Garden answered it, and I thought the answer was really revealing. So also another brief shout out to Brad Trivers, which I think, I will say, since I started watching PI politics again, I will say he is probably the brightest spot in the PI legislature. I mean, he seems to be the most competent member in that legislature by far. I'm impressed that he seems to have an understanding of how markets work. He seems to have an understanding of economics. He and a lot of common sense. I mean, I don't think you have to be like this great like philosopher to work in the PI legislature, but like, I mean, just like, I'm so thirsting for anybody to make sense. I would say he's at the top of my list, and Stephen Meyer sometimes, in my opinion, gets in there and will make some good points, but overall, I think Brad Trivers is the outstanding person. And so it's no coincidence that because he probably is the most outstanding member there, that he's also be the one that's been demoted. I guess he used to hold some minister's position, but that tends to happen when I think competence is not rewarded. I don't think within the King government. But anyway, so I think he asked a good question, and I think Dr. Garden's reply was also quite revealing. So let's get to that, and then I'll give you my thoughts after.
One thing that I hear all the time knocking on doors, and it's maybe a little naive, but there's a limit on the number of medical seats at current medical schools in the area. And everybody says, we need more doctors, or we need more nurses, you know, why don't you increase the number of people who can actually go through the program, right? And frankly, what I'm hearing a lot of times is that it's actually the societies that represent the doctors, whether it be the college or the medical side, they're the ones that are saying, no, you can't increase the medical seats. I wanted to find out from you, if you're willing to share it today, is that an option, again, for a short-term thing while we get our medical school in place?
Split up so that we prevent more people coming into the system? Absolutely. And if there's one good thing that's come out of this pandemic, it has been the calling all the various medical associations and colleges and other things, calling them on the fact that we've essentially wanted to maintain a monopoly. The point that I made to my minister a while ago was that you could be a Canadian, you could go to Harvard Medical School, you could do a cardiac fellowship at Brigham and Women's, and until recently you couldn't come back to the island because we wouldn't accept your American boards as equivalent to the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons, which is appalling, right? But there's a group that's had a monopoly over that for a very long time. So you'd have to write your Canadian exams. Screw that. Why the hell would I spend my time writing my Canadian? I've got a great job in the States. So we lose people when they go to the States to do their residencies. Like from my class at McGill, a large chunk of us went to the US. Many of them never come back because we make it hard for them to come back. Even if they're Canadian citizens, we make it hard for them to come back. It's appalling. We have, if you look at medical school trainees, we have some of the lowest percentage of any OECD country. So we do not train doctors in Canada. We have very few. Again, that's been very tightly controlled. So the idea of more medical schools in the country is a good one, right? We also have 40% of the medical student class at Trinity College in Ireland, they're Canadians. They can't come home. Now, we can change that if there's a political will, and I mean, it's bigger than this room, right? But the Canadian political will to change that, we could simply say, you trained in Ireland, you're good. You trained in the States, you're good. You trained in the UK, New Zealand, Australia, you're good. But historically, we blocked it, and we shouldn't be doing that.
Okay, so I just want to emphasize like how crazy that we all got to see that, okay? Now, what I believe that he said about the monopoly of the college, and I forget the full name, the College of Physicians, I think, and Surgeons. I'm just going to call it the college to make it seem. What he said about the college is incredible. I mean, I think what he said is true, but I've never seen a politician or a bureaucrat honestly talk about some of the very real implications of them having a full monopoly on deciding who can be a doctor in Canada and who can't be a doctor. So that was truly astounding. Like, I'm very much in shock that not only just happened in Canada, it happened in Prince Edward Island. So, how do we start to break this down? Okay, so realistically, what the problem is in Canada right now around healthcare is that supply is not meeting demand, right? So the demand for healthcare is going up. Why is it going up? One of the reasons why it's going up is because the baby boomers, when you look at the distribution of ages and population in Canada, there's this huge blob of baby boomers that are starting to move past the critical age of like 65 years. They've been past that for a bit now. And the thing is, once you cross that particular part of age 65, the average cost to take care of one of these people rises astronomically. So there's this glut of baby boomers that has to move through the healthcare system. So that's going to spike up demand. And the other thing that's spiking up demand, obviously, is the population growth. The more the population grows, the more doctors you're going to need, right? That's natural consequences of it. The reason why demand is always artificially high in Canada, part of it is why it's high, is because Canadians by and large, don't think they should have to pay for it. Obviously, now the reality is that you do pay for it. You know, you work, the government taxes you, they use your tax money to provide you for a doctor. So in a roundabout way, you are paying it for it, but in a very real sense of the word, you don't write a check, you don't take out the cash book. And because you don't take out cash out of your pocket directly, it goes in a roundabout way, you essentially, your cost for healthcare is zero. And again, I hate to be too technical here, but should be basic stuff, and this really needs to be understood. That when you take an economics course, Econ 101, you learn about what is literally called the law of demand. And the law of demand simply states that the cheaper a price of a good or a service is, the more of it you're going to ask. So if you drop the cost of healthcare to zero, so that Canadians are literally paying zero money, then demand also shoots up infinitely, because the cheaper something is, the more you're going to want it. Okay, that is literally called the law of demand, and it is as sure as the law of gravity. Okay, so very important to realize that. So demand is artificially propped up in Canada. Now, what also is another basic law of economics that you learn in Economics 101 is that supply will equal demand. As demand increases, supply will also increase to meet that demand. Because what tends to happen, people demand more and more doctors, so they're bidding up the price they're willing to offer to see a doctor, and the market realizes this and be like, oh, okay, you know, there's a profit margin to be made by servicing these people who are demanding healthcare services, and so the market will naturally start shifting to increase supply. Now, that is not happening in Canada. Why is there a shortage of doctors? And what people have started figuring out, but again has not been really in the conversation until very recently, is that there's a monopoly, like Dr. Garden said, on this society, the college, that gets to decide who gets to be a doctor, who doesn't get to be a doctor. Because when you think about it, if there's a shortage of doctors in Canada, then why aren't you suddenly creating more doctors? I mean, when I was going to school, and I imagine it's still the same, a lot of people want to be doctors. There's a lot of money in it, there's good prestige, when you're a doctor in Canada, you're the man, right? And so I'm always wondered, so there's a clamor to be doctors, but again, it's really hard to get into med school, test scores, and one easy solution has always popped up. It's like, why don't you just lower the standard a bit and increase the number of doctors, potential doctors that could go to med school? Why isn't that a thing? I don't know. Like I said, it's hard to find information on it. Even when I go to the college website and I try and get information, they don't talk about any of this stuff, how many doctors in Canada should be, however not. It's like really a taboo conversation. And I had a personal story myself here. So, at one point, my family is from Italy, and believe it or not, in Europe, and in Italy, at certain periods of times, in certain places, there's actually a surplus of doctors. And, so we had the bright idea, okay, if there's a surplus of doctors, why don't we start a recruiting agency and get some of these doctors to come over to Prince Edward Island, and we can have a nice business matching them up. So when I tried to get this going, I spoke to some people in the bureaucracy from recruitment. They basically told me, yeah, it doesn't work that way. We don't accept people who were trained in all these countries. And then they gave me a list of the countries where they could accept doctors from, and it was hardly any. So they basically told me, if you got a guy from Italy that wants to come and be a doctor, he's basically going to have to go through med school here. Okay, don't you have a doctor shortage? What's wrong with the medical schools in Europe? Are they 20 or 30 years behind you guys? What's going on? Obviously, as Dr. Garden pointed out, there's, for one reason or another, the supply is being restricted. Now, what happens when you restrict the supply? The price shoots up. Costs start going up, right? Because you've got people outbidding each other trying to get these resources. So you take a country like Canada. If you fix the amount of supply, let's take Canada, and let's say hypothetically that, this is just hypothetical, it takes 20,000 doctors to make sure that everybody's getting taken care of in Canada is somehow the college says, you know what, we're gonna work it out. So instead of like giving you 20,000 doctors, we give you like 12,000 doctors. That creates a shortage of 8,000 doctors. Now, what happens is that various provinces are gonna try and outbid each other to get these few resources, and in that race to outbid each other, rest assured the PI is going to draw the short straw. Why is they going to draw the short straw? Because when you look at other economic factors, I forget what it's exactly called, the labor productivity of a Prince Edward Islander is some of the lowest in Canada. In fact, I actually nobody's talking about this, but since the COVID pandemic, it's actually going down, which means like the economic situation of Prince Edward Island is not going to get better anytime soon. It's going to get worse because the people are becoming less productive. That's not a subjective comment that I'm making. That is an objective fact from Stats Canada. Okay, so that when your labor productivity goes down, like it's your situation is going to get worse. So that's another thing. So basically, you don't have the resources to compete with some of your richer counterparts in other provinces. So that means you're always going to have a shortage. So that's what happens. So like, why is the college doing that, not providing enough doctors? I think obviously they will never admit it, that to the real reason, but I suspect it is just because it always comes down to control, you know. It just, if you can keep the restriction, then you kind of like, the more doctors there are, the more you kind of dilute your profession, and so the more people clamor for your services, and so the more important it makes you feel, and also obviously you make more money that way. So I don't know, I mean, it has to be one of those two reasons, guys. Maybe there's other reasons, but I'm just glad that there's other people awakening to the fact that maybe, just maybe, giving this college a monopoly to recruit doctors is not the one and only way to go. So what I take heart in is that, as of recent, Paul McNeil brought this up in an article in his Eastern Graphic. Now, I don't get a chance to read a lot of his articles because it's a paywall, but he brought this up, and he would represent what I would say is the left in Prince Edward Island, or the extreme left if you want to go there. Now you got Dr. Gardner here, who represents the bureaucracy, who also brought up this fact, like having the college tell us who can come here to Prince Edward Island and be a doctor and not be a doctor is really restrictive. And now you got Brad Trivers that's asking questions about it, and I don't know if he would go along with it, but I would say he represents some of the more sane right principles of economic theory. So you got left, right, and bureaucracy all making the same point. So I think Dr. Gardner made other points that we'll go over, but this is one area where everybody seems to agree on that this is an issue. So I would encourage Islanders to get behind this idea of looking at ways to bring doctors that's not through the college, or go to the college and be like, hey, I need doctors right now. You need to give me a list of like 30, 50 doctors right now, and I don't care whether they come from Scandinavia, I don't care if they come from New Zealand, I want them here right now today, and I don't want you to tell me that they need this. So however way you do it, like this idea that the college gets to decide who can be a doctor in Prince Edward Island, I think is a faulty idea. And anyway, I think that will be a good idea to expand that. Then that way you can increase the supply of doctors, which has two effects. Number one, you start lowering the waiting lists, which is a big problem in Canada. Number two, you start bringing down the cost. Because now instead of a doctor or a specialist costing you $250K or $300K, since there's more of them, that's what happens. When you increase the supply, you start decreasing the cost. So it would also help with the budget and the financial situation of Prince Edward Island, which is not looking good. And what could be the potential problem in all this? I think the potential roadblock would be Dennis King, 20 proposals on this, because like Dr. Gardner said, there's bigger forces in Canada that don't want this to happen. And they usually come from the feds. And regardless of what your opinion is, we all have opinions, but like the way I see it playing out, I don't know why, but Dennis King is like in the pocket of like Justin Trudeau for some reason. I have no idea why. I don't know what he sees in that guy. I mean, the damage he has done to Canada is unbelievable, but Dennis King seems to like him. If I had to guess, I'm guessing he's going to vote Liberal in the next federal election. Again, that's speculation. I could be wrong, but seeing the way they're friendly to each other and whatnot, I get the feeling that that's what's going to happen. So I'm guessing any attempt by Prince Edward Island to circumvent the college is going to draw the ire of Justin Trudeau, which automatically means that King is going to be against it. But I'm open to being wrong. I hope I'm wrong, because I think it seems like this is an issue that every single person from whatever political spectrum you're coming from can get behind, and I legit think it's not an end-all be solution to the problem of healthcare and PI, but it will be a big help. So anyway, that's the thoughts I have on it. Let me know if you agree, disagree, and next time I'm going to do a bit longer video talking about some of the other interesting points that Dr. Garden made. Anyway, that's it for now, and I'm going to catch you all guys next time.